Chad Booth here. How does a community pay the invoice on a $1 million fire when the annual budget is only $50,000? Guest host Shawn Milne, Tooele County Commissioner, and our panel of experts will discuss the challenge of budgeting for wildfire, preventative measures, and how the state is helping communities stay out of the red when they have a bad fire year. County Seat is next. The County Seat is brought to you this week by Jones and DeMille Engineering, helping to shape your quality of life. Find out more at jonesanddemille.com.
Hello, I'm Shawn Milne, Tooele County Commissioner. I'm filling in today for Chad Booth on the County Seat. Thank you for joining us. On today's program, we're going to review wildfires and their impact to local and state budgets and what each of us can do to help mitigate the effects of those where we live. But to get us started on this, we're going to go live into the field with Randy Wilden, who is the chief of the North Tooele Fire District, and over to Derek Dowsett.
Scorched earth right up to a fence line is too close for comfort. Fire is uncontrollable and unpredictable, but is still preventable, at least some of the time.
At least 50% of the fires are human caused, and this year that number's up. I've heard 60 to 70% in some areas. Most of our fires this year have been human caused. They had a construction crew that was doing some metal cutting, and this is probably the fourth fire in our district this year alone started by construction equipment. We had Grantsville fire units and North Tooele fire units here in a matter of 4 or 5 minutes, and the fire had already spread from the point of ignition and clear across one whole pasture and was burning towards this shop garage building.
More homes are being built in areas where wildland fire is a threat. We often think of the wildland urban interface, or WUI, as areas near the mountains, and they are. But homes can still be at risk of wildland fire where there is an abundance of fuel in a valley. It is incumbent on landowners to assess threats to their property, but that doesn't mean there isn't some help available.
So one thing that we're doing here in Tooele County that's a little bit different is we're trying to do our fuels mitigation on a broader scale, affecting more and more people. So what we just came out with is a website, TooeleWildfire.org, where as a homeowner you can actually go log on there and fill out an assistance application. And then myself or my assistant will come out and we'll look at your property and say, yeah, this is what we can do to help make your property more safe from a wildfire. Does this sound good to you? And if they agree, we'll bring a contractor in and we'll modify their landscape around their property. And it's been extremely impactful in the community of South Rim, where we've got about 300 plus homes. And through recent mitigation work, I'd say we're probably at about 120 homes impacted in that community.
It is the local fire departments with full-time staff who are typically the first on site to fight a fire. But in the second largest fire district in Utah, with just under 1,700 square miles to protect, local response is relative.
North Tooele is different in that we have full-time firefighters. We're the only fire department in Tooele County that does. We have all of the other entities, whether they're cities or towns, are all volunteer fire departments.
A lot of the time those guys have to go from their day job back to the fire station to get a vehicle and then respond. And so then it's kind of sixes whether the federal people will show up first, the state people, or the local fire department. So our goal is to keep our fires as small as possible, just get them out as quickly as possible, and that's safer for everybody.
The wildland fire that never starts is the one that will save the most lives, resources, property, and time.
Every summer we have fires where we use firefighters from all of those different, and they're all volunteer. They show up in the middle of the night or on a 100-degree Sunday and fight fire, and they're not compensated for anything. They might get an annual steak burger fry or steak dinner or something, and that's it. So my hat's off to them. People don't understand the fire threat, and that these firefighters are at home with their family on a Sunday or a Saturday watching their kids' baseball game or having Sunday dinner, and they drop it all to come out and fight a fire. So people need to be more careful.
Great, well thank you. We appreciate that, Derek and Chief Wilden. Now that we know a little bit more about wildfire here close to home in Tooele County, when we come back, we'll get together with our guests and we'll talk more on the subject. Well, welcome back. Thank you for joining us. Again, today's program is on wildfire in the state of Utah and the local costs that it has, as well as statewide. And we're joined today by three special guests. Jason Curry is the PIO of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. Jilean Ercanbrack, you're the chair of the Juab County Fire District. And Scott Sandall, who is our state senator for District 17. And again, I'm Shawn Milne, filling in today for Chad Booth with the county seat. So thanks everybody for joining us. So about wildfire, we just heard from Chief Wilden some of the local concerns and challenges we have, but maybe tell us a little bit more about Juab County and the overall fire situation you guys have there and the costs and community considerations.
This year in Juab County, we have a hot fire season. We kind of knew it was possibly going to be. If you think about overall acres, and that includes private, BLM, and state, because we have a lot of state and BLM lands in our county. We've burned over 40,000 acres in Juab County this year so far. Compared to last year, we only burned 600 to this date, to currently. We did have some fires later in the season this year, but it seems like fire season has started earlier this year, dry. More fires, they're burning more acreage faster. Our fire district runs on volunteer firefighters, so when our firefighters are called to fight a wildland fire, they're leaving jobs. They're leaving in the middle of their workday to fight these fires and to be the first responders there until some other wildland professionals can get there to help suppress these fires. So we're burning a lot of acreage this year, and its cost is enormous. I mean, we're looking at estimates right now that Juab County's portion, if we had to pay that out of pocket, would be over $1 million at this point in the fire season. So cost to communities is great, especially when you're dealing with taxpayers' money and you're trying to be conservative, but also trying to protect them and their area, their land and acres. So
absolutely. Jason, that's got to be a pretty big cost when the state considers the whole region, right? I mean, if it's that much to one county, and not only just what it affects with their budget, when you think about those firefighters, and so many are volunteers, right?
A lot of them are volunteers, and that's really our front lines. Every single day in Utah here in the 2020 season, since April 18th, we've had multiple starts. You don't often hear about those in the news because the local volunteers end up putting them to rest far before it becomes newsworthy. But the cost is still there for the individual counties, for the state, for the federal government. Right now in Utah, we're exceeding $20 million total.
Wow, that's right now. What's the expectation by the end of the year, do you know?
It's obviously going to exceed that. We could be approaching 30 million. It just really does depend a little bit on the weather and what Mother Nature hands us in terms of wind and red flag days, and it also really depends on the public and how careful they are, and if we can get help for prevention purposes, and if we get their cooperation, then we'll turn out good.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. So hearing those kind of costs, and especially in today's day and age where we've had to do so much trimming to the budget recently because of the pandemic, what are your observations about fighting wildfires here in the state, and whether it's an urban-rural divide or the costs shift from one part of the state to another?
Honestly, Shawn, it's unfortunate that so many of these fires are human caused, and we could eliminate so much cost. The state will be responsible for paying for a lot of the cost, and that's going to come out of budgets like social services. It's going to impact possibly roads. Somewhere we've got to pay for it. The problem with the wildfire, we don't know how to plan how much money we're going to need each season, but we still have all that. When it happens, we just can't let it go and say we don't have the money. We have to put the resources on the ground, and then we have to figure out how to pay for it later. But I'm sure we're going to discuss a little bit about human-caused fires and what percent of those each year are human-caused, and the things that citizens just can do and be watchful not to cause those fires.
Thank you. That's a great point. So, Jason, Jilean, would one of you like to address, how many of these wildfires typically are human-caused versus, say, a dry lightning storm coming through?
Usually in Utah, it's about half, a little more than half. And depending on the year, like for example, right now in Utah, we're at about 82% human-caused fires. So, but rather than the percentage, we focus on the number of human-caused starts. And right now, we're about 650 total. Only about 150 or so have been lightning caused. And so that's really something we keep an eye on is how busy of a lightning season is it? That's what really shows us what the percentage is. But really in reality, at this time of year, typically we're only at about 500, 550 human caused. So it's a busier season than normal.
Yeah, so Jilean, what are some of the most notable human causes that you see in your fire district for these human caused fires?
We see a lot of campers going through our community along the freeway. We have a lot of fires caused right along the freeway based on just chains dragging, tires blowing. That's just right along the freeway, and it's busy. Last year we had a fire that I think we started 6 or 7 going clear down into Millard County that started from a truck that continued just down the highway. Same truck.
Wow.
Went clear down the freeway there and caused several different fires, along the freeway there. So taking, and then other things, campfires, probably fireworks in our community would be, we have a lot of rural open area for people to camp. We have a lot of rural open area for people to light off fireworks. So human causes for us, people burning weeds at this time of the year, not such a great idea. I mean, it's not that time. They shouldn't be burning weeds at all right now, but those are the types of things that are causing wildfires in Juab County.
It's
and probably
interesting.
Around the state.
We are going to be joined this morning by another panelist, our own local fire warden, Dan Walton, and he, just an hour before we began, the program, he had to go respond to one that was caused by someone with a boat trailer, and it was dragging and causing sparks, and it caused a fire. And so, we wish him and all of our first responders the best during this busy season. Now, you mentioned something that also caught my attention about tannerite. There's been a lot of news stories in recent years about the use of tannerite, particularly with these gender reveal parties and some really terrible, massive wildfires, not necessarily in ours, thankfully, for the moment being, but tell me a little bit about that, and if you experience a lot of fires caused by either incendiary rounds or tannerite for target shooters that are out there enjoying a hobby.
Exploding targets are a huge problem. We've seen so far this year more than a dozen. And target shooting in general is pretty safe as long as you're choosing a good backstop, you're using the appropriate ammunition, the appropriate targets. But these exploding targets, the problem is there isn't any warning on the packaging to inform the individual that it could be a fire hazard. And I've talked to a number of people that have been caught off guard by that and have had fires start just as they're out shooting and recreating, and all of a sudden there's a fire, and they say there's no warning at all.
Well, that sounds like a great break. We'll come back and we'll talk again with Senator Scott Sandall and see about possibly some legislation that might be coming or might be considered when we come back. Well, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you coming back from that commercial break. We are again joined by 3 experts on this situation, and we turn first to Senator Scott Sandall with District 17. So tell us, in the last segment we talked about there are some common themes, right, that are along the lines of human-caused fires. What are some of the considerations that you and the state legislature are considering or have considered in the past?
Well, there are a few areas that we have considered in the past. One of them is talking about fireworks. We shortened the days down for legal participation in fireworks programs around the 4th and the 24th. Wildfires in this interland, or the interface between urban and not even rural, but those kind of fires we can basically control. Do we have that debate in the legislature? Do we want to ban fireworks completely? There would be some that say yes, but I would hope that we can show a little more restraint and control and know where we can and can't do those things. The other thing, Shawn, our sports shooting industry in the state is a big business. It's robust. I would hate for us to look at banning sports shooting. And once again, we have a lot of people in our rural areas that like to come out. They like to participate. And quite honestly, in my situation where I farm and ranch and I'm a landowner, if I just stop and visit with them and say, hey, please be responsible, please pick up your trash, do those kind of things, they're really good people. And I think we can do a better job of campaigning that way than we can legislatively. I would hate to get in a fight with those people and say, hey, you can't, we're just going to not let you enjoy your sport. So I think we're always open for discussion. It is a big cost to the state, and public safety becomes a huge issue in these wildfires that we could control, that we can basically stop before they start. So we're open for those debates, but less than likely are we going to come down with kind of statewide mandates.
That's great, and I appreciate that perspective. I know we all do. There's always this challenge in local and state government to create a balance between personal liberties and the ability to enjoy some of the great open spaces that we have, and making sure that we're socially aware of one another and helping being conscientious of other folks around us, including in those target shooting areas, fireworks, and so forth. So, Jilean, as we come from that discussion and we look at the overall cost of firefighting, what are some of those costs? And there's a formula, I understand, correct?
Basically, the state a few years ago kind of took over the fire suppression budget. And they said, hey, if you guys as counties or as fire districts will do certain things, we will help cover the costs of those fires, because hopefully you're going to be doing things that will eliminate or reduce your risk in your county. So, you know, Juab, we're a rural area. We have a lot of BLM ground, a lot of state ground. I've said that before. We have a lot of farmers and ranchers that graze on that ground. So for us, it was important to try to help protect their livelihoods, because they lose every time. They could lose cattle, they could lose grazing. So the state's given us a number that says, based on, you know, the number of red acres or fire danger you have in your community, this is how much money you should spend each year in protecting your county or protecting your area. And so what Juab County has done is we've gone out and we've hired local firefighters. They are working for us full time, and their whole job is to mitigate fuel. They go around the county working on private projects. They also are doing some county projects or some private land projects in conjunctions with getting grants and whatnot. And we're spending our money actually making fire breaks, mitigating fuel, mitigating those areas that are dangerous that could help keep a fire from coming into the urban interface, that could create a fire line so that firefighters could stop it right there, or that it could not start, or that they can get access to it. So this year we're very grateful for the state program, because it does mean that $1 million we will not have to spend out of pocket. We get to spend a significant less.
And that's interesting. I know we'll come back from the commercial break and we'll talk about some of those things that can be done between that urban and wildland interface to help mitigate those costs. But I understand that the formula is somewhat about a 5-year rolling average, and you take out a high and low and whatever that county's or jurisdiction's overall annual cost was, and then you average out what's left, correct? It can be pretty high.
That is part of it, yeah. We do have a pretty robust GIS element to it.
What does that mean?
As Jilean, yeah, so Jilean mentioned the red acres. So geographic information system, basically a map and several layers on that map that basically help us assess what the fire danger is.
So kind of like a risk assessment of the acreage within the jurisdiction. Great, well thank you very much. So when we come back from this next break, we'll go over what some of those, again, things that either private citizens or your local government agencies, state agencies can do to help control those costs. Thanks, and we'll be right back. Thanks for joining us again. So we heard right before the commercial break some of the way that we formulate the costs associated with fighting these fires at both the local and state level, and how incredibly expensive they can be. But Jason, what are some of the things that we can do both at the local government level as well as, you know, every citizen to help avoid those costs, and most importantly, keep our families and our property safe? Saratoga Springs is a really great example of that recently, right?
Right, exactly. And so for local government, it's the Community Wildfire Preparedness Plan. Having that plan, updating it, and then sticking to all the work that's entailed. For the individual homeowner, their role is really easy. They can go online to wildfirerisk.utah.gov They can click on their individual property, and then they can generate a report, and it tells them simple things that they can begin doing by themselves, and then things that they can do to be involved in their local government and be a part of the solution.
Really, it goes that specifically down to an individual parcel? Huh?
Yep.
Oh, no kidding. So what is this plan that you were talking about at the community level?
Yeah, the Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So all of the actions that Jilean was talking about for Juab County, all those actions that they do to meet their minimum are all entailed in that plan.
What are some of the things that a local government typically does to help, mitigate these fire costs? Jilean?
So, like I said, we're mitigating our open areas. We are going in with different projects to create fire lines or fire breaks between the urban interface, so that we're helping. We're working with landowners who would like some of their property done. We're working on getting grants to go in and be able to take out trees, take out just a few things, clean up the area so that if there's a fire, firefighters, one, have easy access to it, and two, hopefully it will hold that line so that it doesn't progress any farther into an actual community from the rural or forest area.
I know here in unincorporated Tooele County we've had a lot of success with mastication, where a bullhog treatment, you tear down those juniper trees that seem to burn really hot and fiercely and help the fire go quite a bit. So that's been a pretty good project that our warden, Dan Walton, has done with some landowners of some significant parcels. So it's been a really great project, and really appreciate his hard work. Are there similar things, Jason, that local governments can do before we go back to the person?
You bet. So the fuels reduction, that's a huge part of it. But training for firefighters, preparedness, and prevention efforts are all part of that and make up those costs that go towards their protection.
So again, like if you're a homeowner on the edge of one of these boundaries of a large housing development, what are some real quick takeaways we can give them today, and then invite them to go back to that website and look at their individual parcel? Yeah,
clean up around the yard. Clean the rain gutters, look at opportunities that if an ember fell onto your property somewhere to catch fire, where would that be? And a lot of it is really just looking around and cleaning up, limbing up, thinning your fuels, and preparing that way.
Excellent.
If you have dried weeds, create a space between you and your yard and those spaces that have the dry weeds and whatnot around.
Excellent, and that's good to do, especially this time of year with the fireworks, right? But it's always great to keep in mind throughout the whole year. And really appreciate Senator Scott Sandall. Thank you so much for joining us today virtually. And Jilean, Jason, again, really appreciate all the efforts that you and all of our first responders are doing. We want to make sure that you're safe, and it really takes us doing our part to make sure of that. And thank you for joining us. And remember that the government closest to you is the most effective and the most important. If you feel like you've learned something today, please share it with a friend so that we can all benefit from it. And again, until next time, thanks for joining the county seat. See you next week.
Thank you for watching The County Seat. Be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications to keep up to date on the program and happenings around Utah.